Hey, I just want to say, really excited about today and this brand new building that we're in. For some of you, this is your first time here, and this is just kind of your normal. For those of us who have been a part of Icon Church from the very beginning, this is anything but normal. We started having services 3 years and 10 days ago today, right on the other side of I-35 at Texas Old Town, a wedding venue. Some of you are familiar with it. Some of you got married over there, and that was where we had church. That was our church building over there. We would set up and tear down every single week, and then we went to Goodnight Middle School in San Marcos, and we were there for a little over a year, and now here we are back up in Kyle where services first started at 400 Old Post Road, and this feels like a dream. And here's the thing. Here's what I realized. For some of you, this church thing might be something that you're not real familiar with. Maybe you didn't grow up in church, maybe singing songs and that sort of thing. That's why Benji kind of talked about what's happening when people sing songs and they kind of raise their hands and that sort of thing. We want to try to make this as welcoming of an environment as we can and explain things kind of as we go, because I realize this may be a little foreign to some people. If you grew up in church like myself, did anybody grow up in church, sleeping under pews, drawn on hymnals, in hymnals sometime? Okay, so a few of us, yes. For us, when we talk about things like flannel graphs and Sunday school and the song Shout to the Lord, we all know what we're talking about. And to the rest of you, you have no clue what a flannel graph is. And Shout to the Lord means nothing to you. And Sunday school sounds like a form of punishment, which sometimes it was. But you have no clue, right? That doesn't mean anything. And sometimes, even maybe what you experienced here coming to Icon, you've never experienced it. I get it that some of those things, aren't things that happen every day in the real world. When you roll into Target, you typically don't see Target workers with signs welcome to Target. I'm so glad you're here today. And I'll just tell you right now, if you ever go into Starbucks, start shaking random people's hands and hugging them and saying, well, I'm so glad you're at Starbucks today, they might look at you a little funny. So I get it. There have been some things that maybe aren't real normal to you, and you're kind of figuring out this whole church thing. And what we wanted to do, especially on this first Sunday here in this new building for our grand opening, is we know we have a lot of guests here. So we said, let's tell them a little bit about Icon, a little bit about who we are as a church, why we exist, and what we hope to do in the community. And we were talking about this. We really said, let's wrap it around this idea that we say a lot here at Icon, and we're going to have it up here on our walls, and you can see it when you go to our website. But it's this idea that we say that everyone is welcome because nobody is perfect. Because of that, we believe anything is possible. That's something we say here at Icon Church quite a bit. This is kind of one of our core values that we believe in. And I just want to take the next few moments to talk about these three ideas. And I actually want to start with this last one. Anything is possible. And what do I mean by anything is possible? I think the best illustration I could give you of anything is possible is, well, look around right now. Where you're at right now, the chairs you sit in are really an impossibility. I mean, there really aren't very many churches that are 3 years old that are in a facility like this. This was an impossible situation when we looked at it initially. This couldn't have happened without God making it happen each step along the way. I remember the first time I heard about this facility, we'd only been having services for a few months, and someone came up to me and said, man, I heard that the pastor might be selling this building. You should go talk to him. And I mean, we were setting up and tear down. We were 2 months old, didn't know what we were doing. And I was like, okay. So I went in and met the pastor, and he told me how much he was selling it for, and I choked on my water and walked out the door and thought, there's no way. It's crazy. There's not a chance. It'll never happen. And what kept happening over the next few years is this building just kept kind of coming back up and coming back up. And now you're sitting in the seats. You're sitting under the roof of something that I can't explain how impossible this situation was, but here we are. You see, to me, anything is possible. This is my anything. This is a certificate of occupancy from the city of Kyle. This means we're legal. You're allowed to sit in the chairs that you're in. This building won't burn down, theoretically. The fire stuff works. Fire suppression works. The fire people came through, the fire department and fire inspector, and they came through, and the city inspectors came through, and you got to have this done, you got to have that done, and we got all these. And then once everything was done, and they said, okay, The building's good to go. The building's yours. They signed this, and on here it says Icon Church, and they said, you can start having services in here. And we said, done. And we moved in right away. We've actually had 2 services in here. This is our 3rd service in here. But this is our grand opening. We wanted to get our feet under us and get used to it. Like, for instance, there's some signs around here that say max capacity. That was one of the things that the city said we had to have done. So when they asked us to do that, the first thing we did was we grabbed a Sharpie and like literally wrote on a piece of paper, occupancy 5, whatever, and we put it in a sign. So if you're here 2 weeks ago, you might have saw that and gone, looks like a 3rd grader wrote that. That was me, and it worked. As long as it passed, we're good. So that's, to us, we really believe this, because we're living this. So I don't know where you are. I don't know if you've ever had a dream that you tell somebody and they kind of laugh, or you tell someone and maybe you don't even believe it. There's part of you that you're like, I don't even know if I believe this is possible. Maybe it was a job. Maybe it was starting a new business. Maybe it was that girl or that guy and you told people and they said, yeah, right? Like whatever it was that seemed impossible for you, you're in a place right now that believes that it's possible, that anything is possible because we're living it right here, right now. You're in a church that believes in the impossible because we believe in a God that's beyond the realm of our possibilities. Amen? The other thing that we believe here is that this is a church where nobody's perfect. Now, I know you might come in here and you maybe saw the band up here and you saw them doing everything and you think, man, this seems like they've got their stuff together. They seem like they know what they're doing. If you thought that when you walked in, we fooled you, right? Like this is the first church I've ever pastored in my life. Like there is no manual for like how to run a church. Like we're kind of a ragtag group of people that are figuring this out as we go. You see, this church, this group, all of you here, this started with about 12 people sitting in my living room. People that we didn't know what we were doing. But we believed in a God of the impossible. And we knew, hey, we may not be perfect, but we want to be available. And we may not have all the answers, but we believe in a God that's above everything that we know anyway. So we're going to trust him. And I want to show you a picture of that original core team in the first place where we got a meeting space. This is, we've grown a little bit since the 12 in my living room, but after the living room, this was the first space. We kind of outgrew our living room, and we thought, this is awesome. So we looked for a meeting space that could seat a few more people, but we had this one criteria: we needed free. So the budget was pretty small or non-existent. And if you look at this picture, and I know it's really bad quality, but it maybe doesn't take that long before you notice the Dos Equis sign up at the top and all the neon in the picture, and you start wondering, where is this at? This is our first meeting space, which was actually the side room at the Tap Room Bar in San Marcos, right on the square. That was our first legitimate meeting space, was meeting in a bar, and Benji would lead worship right there in the side room, because otherwise we get really funny looks. And we realized that if we just bought some appetizers and stuff, they'd let us meet in this space for free, and we started doing that, and we realized that we don't have all the answers. We really are a church of a bunch of people that we're not perfect. And I know sometimes when you come into a space like this and you look at the team and you look at the people, you think, I don't know if I buy that all the way. In fact, I want to talk about one person that was on the stage just a few minutes ago. And her name's Nicole Schultz, and she helped lead worship up here. She was in that picture. She was a part of that original 12 people that started Icon Church from scratch. You might look at someone like that, someone who's leading worship, someone who has a successful business, someone who helped start a church from scratch. Like, who does that? And look at her and say, man, she has it all together. I mean, she must be perfect. And in fact, this second item I have up here is hers. And you might look at this and not know what this is, because I didn't. I didn't know. I called this a makeup spray gun. Apparently, it has a real name called an airbrush thing. I don't know the proper name, but it's for makeup, and apparently girls use those. But here's the thing. She has one of these because she has her own business, and she does makeup for weddings and photo shoots and all kinds of things for these high-end weddings and different things happening. And you might look at that and go, man, that's like the picture of perfection, right? Like doing makeup with an airbrush gun to look perfect in your picture or look perfect on your wedding day. And here she is leading worship and helping to start a church and say, well, that girl, she has it all together. She doesn't know anything about not being perfect. But I want to invite her up on the stage to share just a little bit about her story and how God has used her here at Icon Church. So, everybody, Nicole Schultz.
Well, good morning. Like Dan said, my name is Nicole. I am a makeup artist and esthetician. I am in the business of perfection. That is so very opposite of my life. I moved to San Marcos, Kyle area, to help be a part of this church, and I was leading worship and small groups and trying to point people to Jesus. And a few years ago, I found myself being scraped up off the kitchen floor by my roommate because I had went out and drank too much and had a one-night stand. I unraveled. I immediately was like, I can't do this church thing. I can't do this Jesus thing. I can't. Like, I am not enough, and I can't fix this mess. And I met with Kelly Matlock like a week later, and she sat across from me, and she said, God is not done with you. He has a plan and a purpose for your life. You're so very loved. And you guys, that is huge. And it is so amazing to be a part of a church that I am fully known and fully loved. That no matter what my sins and my mess look like, God is for me still, and I can get back up and start again. I am so very grateful for Icon and for this room, because it's not about this building, it's about the people in this room coming alongside and being like Jesus to each other and saying, God is for you, there's more for you, he's not done with you. You can get up and you can go and you can move and you can still change the world and you can still change the world around you. And I am so very thankful for this room, and I hope and I pray that if you're new here, you find that grace and you find acceptance and you find God's love and his mercy for you. So.
Nicole said something that I think's really important, that she found a place where she can be fully known and fully loved. And I think we've all sat in circles where we're fully loved, or at least we're made to feel that way, but we know we're not fully known. We know that if they knew this about my life, if they knew what I've done, if they knew what happened last night or the fight we had when we came in, I'm sure they wouldn't treat me this way. We've been in rooms where we've been fully known, but we knew we weren't fully loved at the same time. There's something powerful that happens when you can be fully known and fully loved at the same time. And that's the power of community, and that's the power of church, and that's what this thing is supposed to be all about. See, too often when we come to church, you see, I grew up in church. I knew the game you're supposed to play. You know, as you're driving in, you're having a fight with your family, and you're yelling at the kids, and you're doing the whole, I will pull this car over, you know. And then before you walk in, you're like, we're going into church. You smile, and you like it. You walk in, hey, brother, how you doing? Sister, good to see you. God bless you, you know. And you know, and what do we do when we walk in? What are we communicating? We got to have it all together. That we have to be picture perfect. We got to put the makeup on. We got to put the mask on. Because in this room, if they knew, they wouldn't accept us. They wouldn't love us. And that's why it doesn't scare me to have a team member, have someone come up here and tell you her story about a time that she fell and fell hard. Because we told her, we said, Nicole, it's okay to not be okay. It's just not okay to stay that way. And that's what we believe here at Icon Church. If you're not okay right now, if you're saying, I feel like he's talking to me because my life feels like a mess and I am not okay, I want you to know it's okay. It's okay to be that way right now. My challenge would be, we want to love you enough that you just don't stay that way. You allow God to come in like he did for Nicole. And you allow someone like my wife to look you in the eyes and say, God isn't done with you yet. The final chapter of your story has not been written, and God has not discarded you. You are not done. God still has a plan, and he still has a purpose for your life. We're a place, and nobody's perfect. if you're looking for a church today, can I say this? If you've been looking around for a church and you're looking for a perfect one, look elsewhere. Because we're not it. I'm not it. And you know what? I'll just challenge you with that a little bit. Once you've found a perfect church, it's not perfect anymore because you're there. Let's be honest. Right? Like we're all messed up, right? Nobody's perfect. And we don't want to pretend we're that way. But then that kind of brings me to the last point. It's this idea of everyone is welcome. Now, I realize what we think when we hear this. You think, okay, what do you mean by everyone is welcome? What do you mean by everyone? Do you mean everyone is welcome? And I was trying to think in the same way I was talking about the certificate of occupancy and Nicole and the makeup. I was trying to think, I wish I could tell someone's story to explain how we believe that everyone really is welcome. And like a crazy extreme story, a story of someone going, man, if they're welcome here, surely I'm welcome here. And I started realizing, I thought of different people in the church, and I was like, oh, I could tell their story. I realized how bad that sounds, right? Like, listen to this guy. Man, if this guy's welcome, because this guy's jacked up. So if they're welcome, you're definitely welcome. And the guy's just like, oh, God, I'm sorry. You know, I realized, like, that's not a win, right? Like, it's kind of hard to tell a story about someone of everyone being welcome if they're like, obviously they're not welcome. But if they're welcome, then I can be welcome. And I started thinking about this, and I thought about a story I've actually told here at Icon Church before, a friend of mine that I've actually told you about before, and I want to tell his story again. So if you've heard this story, just bear with me. And if you haven't, I want you to listen, because I really mean when I say everyone's welcome, I really mean everyone. So to tell this guy's story, I grabbed a little prop. It's over here, and I know what most of you have been thinking this whole service. Like you've been looking up here and seeing something framed in this here and a bottle of bourbon, and you're thinking, what kind of church is this? The rest of you are thinking, we're going to have some communion today, and it's going to be good. Like, right? Like, they know how to do communion right. I am coming back to this place. Jesus, I'm first. Like, I don't know what you thought when you saw this up here, but the reason I have this bottle of bourbon, this Evan Williams, is because my friend Dave loved bourbon probably a little too much. And Evan Williams was his favorite kind, and Dave was probably a functioning alcoholic, also a tattoo artist, two things that don't always go great together. Having someone tattoo you, you can imagine. But anyway, Dave was one of the first people I met when I moved here. And he became one of my first friends when I moved to town. He was my neighbor. He lived directly above us in our apartment. And I got to know Dave, and Kelly got to know his wife, Tiffany. And here's a picture. This is Dave. And Dave's a great guy. I know you can tell from looking at this, but when you first look up here, you might realize right away why he might be one of those people you're going, everyone? As you look at Dave's pentagram t-shirt and his upside-down cross, he also has a Misfits tattoo right there, and the pentagram over there, you might begin to look at this and go, oh, wow, Dave's probably not a churchy kind of guy, right? He's probably somebody that doesn't darken the door of too many churches, and I'd say you're right. Dave was a self-described Satanist, and his wife, Tiffany, was kind of more agnostic, but had been burned by the church, and Dave was one of the first people I met when I moved to town, and he was my upstairs neighbor. We got to know each other. In fact, one of the first times Kelly met Tiffany, they were playing with their kids out in the playground, and they were looking for a daycare program, Dave and Tiffany were, for their son, Cutter, and she was just explaining how she was frustrated with all the daycare programs in town because they were all Christian daycare programs attached to churches, and her and Dave hate the church, and it's so dumb, and they're so religious and judgmental, and just railed on and on and on about how much they hated the church. And like you would expect, just like from a sitcom, she looked at Kelly and she goes, so, I mean, what did you and Dan move down here for? Kelly kind of stuttered a little bit and said, well, actually, to start a church, actually, believe it or not. And instantly, Tiffany kind of starts backpedaling and apologizing. And, well, not all churches are that way. Sure. We got to know Dave and Tiff. And I remember I'd moved here to start a church. And I had met Dave. And I remember it was a few weeks in that Dave invited me over to his place. And he said, every Friday night, I have a bunch of my tattoo buddies. They all come over. And we go upstairs and we play cards. And we drink and hang out, and I was wondering if you could come and you wanted to hang out with us. And I remember being struck for a moment. Here I am, a pastor, a church planter, being invited to go hang out at my Satanist neighbor's house while they all get drunk and gamble together. And I thought, like, what do I do with that? Like, they didn't go over this in Bible school. They didn't, like, 101 Satanist neighbor friend, like what to do when invited over by said Satanist. Like, they didn't cover that. And I remember sitting there and really questioning it for a moment, and then it hit me. And I remember what was written about Jesus and what was said about him, that he was ridiculed for being a friend of sinners. And it even said of notorious sinners. And people accused Jesus of being a glutton and a drunkard because of who he hung out with. I said, you know what? If I'm starting a church, I would love it if someone accused me of the same things that they accused Jesus of. So you better believe it. Every single Friday night, I'd go up there with them. And I decided, I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'd go out with these guys and get dinner and watch a movie and blow $20 like that. So God, you've got $20. I'm going to go up there with them. You've got $20 and you got to make this last. And because we were on a budget and it was tight, and I remember telling Kelly, like, hey, can I have $20 to go gamble with the buddies with? And didn't go over real well, but I realized, I was like, God, I'm going to give you that. And I would do that to hang out with them. And you know what? If people say stuff, people say stuff. And that $20 lasted 6 months. Every Friday, I'd go up there and hang out with them. And I realized it lasts so long because as the night wore on, I got better and better at cards. Or they got worse and worse at cards as the night wore on, if you know what I mean. They started making really poor decisions in their game playing. And I said, you know what? I want to be the kind of church that Dave is welcome at. That if Dave were to walk through those doors in his Slayer shirt and his hat on, that we wouldn't look sideways at him. That we'd welcome him. We'd say, you know what? You're welcome here. And I decided that's the kind of church we want to be. And what's so cool is that as we got to know Dave and Tiffany, Dave started saying things to me like, man, I'm so glad that Tiffany's hanging out with Kelly. Tiffany doesn't have really any good influences in her life, and I could tell that there's been some real positive changes in Tiffany's life. I just want to say thank you, man. And finally, before we ever launched church services, see, we moved here about 1.5 years before we ever had church services. We said we wanted to be the church before we had church. And I remember standing out on Dave's porch, and he looked at me one night, and he said, you know what, Dan? He's like, you know I'm not really about the whole church thing, but I've decided I think I want to visit your church when you guys have services. It's like, it's not because I want to believe that or anything like that, but you've helped me out at the tattoo shop, and you've done some things for me, and I want to support you in what you're doing. I want to come to your church, but I want to warn you, when I walk in, the building may burn down. I said, oh, Dave, if anything happens, you're going to burn to the ground. But you know, it's cool. It's fine. I'm sure you'll be all right. We'll have a fire extinguisher handy. We'll put you out real fast. And we laughed, and to me, that night, I realized this is who I want to be. Unfortunately, before we ever launched services, Dave and Tiffany ended up moving to California, and they haven't moved back, but we stay in touch, and I'm so glad. And so when I say everyone's welcome, you know what I mean? I mean everyone's welcome. So I don't care who you are. I don't care what you've done. I don't care what you believe or don't believe. I want you to know that you are welcome here. You're welcome here. When we were talking about this first morning, we said we want to talk about what it means to love people unconditionally. See, a lot of times we talk about love, but we talk about it when there's some exceptions. Oh, we'll love you, but you need to do this. Like, we love you and you're welcome here, but you need to, and we start giving them the laundry list. Now, we believe that unconditional love with exceptions is not unconditional love. No exceptions. We love you, and you're welcome here. We talked about what to call this service. What do we say here? We wanted to tell people to welcome home. This is what we want this to be about. See, a church isn't a building. A church isn't a roof. It's not some chairs. It's not a service once a week. Church is you. It's me. It's a home to belong to. It's people. You know, the kind of life change that Nicole experienced, the reason she experienced it is because she experienced this. She experienced community that loved her, that accepted her even when she was messed up, and that believed that for her that anything really was possible. The church is a home to belong to, so we want to tell you, welcome home. If you don't have a church home, if you've been looking, if maybe you've been far from church for a long time, He said, I don't know. I talked to somebody after first service, and he said, that guy you talked about, that Dave guy, that's me. I never would have darkened the doors of a church. I don't know what got me here, but this is my home. It was so encouraging that someone is finding home and finding community. And that's what we want to say to you. See, there's this passage early on, this letter that was written to an early church. Early in the starting of the church, Jesus was teaching this way of life. And at first, it was the Jews that began to believe and began to follow. And there's this following of people. And they started calling themselves Christians. And for a while, it was just these Jewish believers. But something happened as this message of Jesus, of hope and love, began to spread across the known world. There were people that weren't Jews that began to start following this way of Jesus. And there became this problem because there were these insiders, these Jewish people that understood the customs and everything. And then there was these outsiders, these Gentiles. And they wanted to follow Jesus. And there was this problem in an early church. And they said, what do we do with these people? Can they be a part of things? Do they have to jump through all these hoops to belong? Or can they just belong right here where they're at? This early church planter, this guy named Paul, he wrote this letter to one of these churches of Gentiles, one of these people, the outsiders, the exiles. And I want to read for you what Paul said because I think it applies to us today every bit as much as it did back then. Paul said, "You're no longer wandering exiles. This kingdom of faith is now your home country. You're no longer strangers or outsiders. You belong here with as much right to the name Christian as anyone. God is building a home. He's using us all, irrespective of how we got here and what he is building. He used the apostles and prophets, the Jews that came before, for the foundation. But now, he's using you, fitting you in brick by brick, stone by stone, with Christ Jesus as the cornerstone that holds all the parts together. We see it taking shape day after day, a holy temple built by God, all of us built into it, a temple in which God is quite at home." See, when we talk about this idea of welcome home, yes, it's about a church home. If you've been seeking and looking for one, we want to be that. We want to be that community for you. But it's bigger than that. See, God would use this analogy time after time throughout the scriptures of family, and that being what this kingdom of God, following Jesus, is all about. It's about becoming a part of a family. And when we say welcome home, we mean more than just a church home. We're also talking about the family of God. Because here's what I realized after doing this whole church thing long enough, is there's probably some people in this room that aren't followers of Jesus, that aren't Christians, or people that are even wondering and wrestling in themselves right now, where do I land? Because maybe I'm a used to be Christian. I used to do that. I used to believe those things, but I don't know right now. And I don't know where you land in that continuum. But in a moment, the band is going to sing a song, and it's a song that they wrote. Now, I want to put up some of the lyrics from that song. It says, "Even in my doubting, even in my wondering, there you were beside me, calling me home." The reason we're going to sing this song, and the reason the band, they wrote this song, was because this is their story. This is my story. So there's been times that I've doubted. There's been times that my heart has wondered. And in the midst of that, maybe you used to follow God. Maybe you used to be a Christian, but your heart has wandered. And you're sitting here right now, and you know that you've fallen away and you've drifted from that first love. God wants to look at you today and say, welcome home. He wants to welcome you back. And if you're in this room, and maybe you're like our friend Tiffany, and you don't know what to believe about God, you're not sure he's even out there, and you don't know what to think, it doesn't matter where you land. God wants to tell you, welcome home. He loves you just the way you are. It's okay to not be okay. You don't have to get your act together before you can become a part of this. We believe at Icon Church that you can believe before you behave. you can even belong before you behave. The door is open to you. The opportunity is yours. So here's what I'm going to do. In a moment, I'm going to give you an opportunity to accept Jesus, to accept that free gift of life that he's given, to become a follower of Jesus. And if you've been in church before, what usually happens right now is I ask you to bow your head and close your eyes for privacy, but I'm actually not going to do that today. Because I believe that it's okay to not be okay. That nobody's perfect in this room. That in a moment, if you slip up your hand, you say, yeah, I'm not a Christian, but I want to be, that that's okay. You're in a room of people that are excited about that. No one's looking sideways at anyone. So if that's you, you're in this room and you're not a Christian, but you want to be today, you can have that opportunity. Would you just slip your hand up? Just acknowledge, yeah, that's me. I'm not a follower of Jesus, but I want to be. If that's you, just slip your hand up. Yeah, I see that hand. Once you raise it, you can go ahead and put it down. Anybody else? We have an opportunity. God is saying, welcome home. You can have a church family home to belong to. You can have a family of God to belong to as well. So here's what we're going to do. Would you stand with me? We're going to sing one final song together, and then I'll come back up and dismiss. I'm going to pray in just a moment. For those of you who slipped your hands up, if you're a Christian in this room and you saw someone raise their hand, would you do something in this final song? Would you go to them? Maybe put a hand on their shoulder and pray with them so that we can be family. We've got a gift for you. We've got a Bible out at the info center. If you want to go by there and get that after service, you can do that. We want to help you in this journey of faith because we realize that this is just the beginning, and we want to help you along the way. So let's pray and sing this final song together. God.